So good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining this Farm Advisory Service webinar tonight entitled Funding Opportunities to Improve Herd Performance. So as farmers are constantly being encouraged to improve efficiency, we are deciding to focus a little bit on that this evening. So we're going to cover some new funding available and a new tool that's available to help farmers drive forward efficiency in cattle and sheep enterprises. So my name's Hazel Laughton. I'm a senior consultant with SAC Consulting based in the Lanark office. And tonight I'm joined by Robert Logan, who is the Co-op Development Manager with the Scottish Agricultural Organisation Society, or SAOS, as some of you might know them a bit better. So tonight, Robert is going to take us through the newly launched MyHerdStats tool, which is available on the Scotty ID website. He's going to walk us through the layout and highlighting all the key performance indicators which can help drive management decisions to allow us to make further improvements to support herd, business and environmental efficiency. And then I'll come back on and I'll cover the recently launched animal health and welfare interventions, the funding that's available through the Preparing for Sustainable Farming initiative.
Good evening, everyone, and thanks for inviting me along, Hazel. Yeah, so MyHerdStats. Maybe firstly, if I step back a little bit and introduce myself a little bit better. So I work for Co-op Development Manager, as Hazel mentioned, with SAOS, SAOS is a development body for producer and rural co-ops. And I suppose as part of that role, a lot of it's to do with governance and board development work, but there's another part of it, increasing part of it's around sustainability and trying to understand what that actually means to individual co-ops and what they can do about it to support their membership, their farmer membership. And within that, so within SAOS, under our own umbrella, we've got Scotty ID. So Scotty ID, in effect, is a co-op. It's governed as such, and it's held under those same values and principles. So within Scotty ID, we're looking at sustainability, and well, as you know, Scotty ID is essentially a custodian for a large amount of data, held on behalf of farmers, cattle keepers for statutory purposes. Originally and importantly, that's around traceability and biosecurity. But increasingly, there are a few add-ons since then, which are further into animal health and BVD, and then spec, so beef provenance, with the QMS. So, but here, the hypothesis was that there's a wealth of information in there that belongs to farmers, but if we recompute that, reconfigure it essentially, and present it back, is there enough useful information to make it worth actually making it into a platform in itself? And I think the answer to that is very much yes. And what we're doing here is the very start of that, and hopefully we'll be able to polish it and add features and develop it as we go. So hopefully now. So essentially the data is an expression of your own herd's performance. That's what we're trying to do here. So we've not asked for any additional information at all. It's all your information that sits within Scotty ID for the purposes already mentioned, but this is about reflecting that information back, hopefully to provide a level of management insight. And it's aimed at asking the right questions. What data doesn't do is tell you answers. What it hopefully can do, if we look at it properly and ask the right questions, then it does exactly that. It helps us to ask questions of the information, which will hopefully help then, refine management efficiencies or environmental efficiencies in genetics. So we're looking at these kind of three things. How can that data help us ask the right questions to be able to inform management decisions and the genetics that we're using in our herds, and how does that dovetail with the environment that we have, our farms that we have, and how they perform. So the task then is to understand, once you've asked those questions, then you can't do everything all at one time. So then there's a next step, which is looking at prioritizing that information to understand, well, yes, that's important, but how important? Is Is it valuable, or is it slightly valuable, or is it immediately urgent? You know, where's the priority? So how do we do that? And just to help inform management decisions, you know, get a step closer to making a confident decision based on a track record, what's happened on your farm. Yep. So hopefully that ends up being, you know, you're able to then have higher value conversations more quickly with the family around the kitchen table, with your vet, your consultant, your management team, whoever you decide in that close group. So why now? So essentially, Scott EID has always been about filling that industry need, and that's supporting farmers. And this was another part of that, looking at business. Nobody needs to know, margins and everything else, looking to hopefully improve business performance. So about business efficiency and improving. But also environmental efficiency now as well. So those the two things can go hand in hand. So, and at a practical level, that was made possible more recently when we get the final transfer of data across from BCMS at the end of 2021. So when that come across, that's all the information that we are needing for the purposes of MyHerdStats is now under the auspices of Scott EID, and it wasn't before. So that makes it an awful lot easier to start to look at the data and hold the data and then manipulate how it comes across, so we can look at it in a way that makes sense at a farm level in MyHerdStats platform. Scott EID, an interesting little bit here, I suppose. I've sort of touched on it. But they're the custodians. Scott EID sit there as custodians of statutory registration and movement data, essentially. Data. So we've also got that because of that, and how it's developed over time into other species, as well as its additional use cases for cattle. You look at data programming expertise that sits behind that. So we've got the expertise there, so, and we've got the data sitting there. So that was two of the key hurdles that you need to deal to get into the next stage. The other part I think is really important is the fact that it's under common ownership. That's a good way of putting it. It's owned by those that supply the information, and that's, in this case, for this audience, that's you. It's your information. So in effect, it is a co-op, and it's certainly held and managed as such. So there's a co-op governance structure, and it's held under those values and principles. So it's your data held on your behalf, and nothing else happens with that information on MyHerdStats for helping you run your businesses. So if I go on, so if I jump to get to that point, what you see here should be, it's not quite the landing page of Scott EID, but once you click on the Scott Moves button, so if anybody's doing that as we're speaking just now, hopefully this works. But you should be able to, once you click on the Scott Moves Plus button, you'll get a drop-down box, and then the next arrow down is, you'll see in the submenu, is Open MyHerdStats. So that's how you get into it. So it runs off the same login and security gateway, if you like, as Scott EID. So once you're in Scott EID, it's part of the same website links. So it will work. So it should be a smooth transition in jumping into MyHerdStats pages. So that's us now in the landing page of MyHerdStats. So you'll see up the top right-hand corner, there's a drop-down box, so you can put whatever year you would like to look at in that box, whatever your focus is. And what we'll do now, I suppose, is we'll walk through each of these tabs. Now, what you'll see from here, I'm working off of a presentation just to make sure we don't have any issues with lag within my internet. But also it saves, your CPH would come up on screen as well, and I've blocked that out. There is no dummy data in Scott EID. It's all your farm information. So I've kindly been given permission to use a particular farm. So I would rather not be in the live system and trying to mask CPHs and all the rest of it. So, but most likely just that lag thing. So that should work. So what we'll do now is we'll walk down through the left-hand side, and that's each of the tabs, and we'll do them in order. Now, there's a few interesting little things here. We need to remember, like, data is just zeros and ones, so we need to be able to tell that data what the parameters are for defining a cow, for instance, or defining young stock. So we need to be able to tell the data what we're actually asking of it. And one of the biggest things here, maybe should have mentioned that at the start, is that the concept, the hypothesis we talked about at the start was fair enough, and we're working off of spreadsheets and then of coding off of static data, and that's all very fine. One of the key pieces here, of course, is, and this is about that nobody sees, it just is taken for granted, is that what we're doing now is essentially plugging into a live system. Now you still talk about a big pool of data. Well, actually, probably for the benefit of analogy, is it's a reasonably slow moving, but it's a moving wide river of data. The width of the data is just the number of animals that are on the ground in Scotland at the moment. But the depth of data is essentially there's years of back data of dams and grand dams and sires and all those connections. So that's all sits underneath the surface of the water. And what we're doing is securely, and that's the key point here, that only you see your data, is securely plug into that live river of data as it moves past. So we've got to then interpret that information that's we're taking out of it and define what we're actually wanting to look at. So here in the carbon performance tab, you'll see up the top here it's showing you the years and the number of cows that calved on each of those years, and a series of kind of metrics. So there's this, each of the tabs is just looking at your data in a series of charts and tables with hopefully some key and valuable bits of information to be teased out to start to question her performance. Below that, you'll see the number of there's twins that were born and total calves that were born, etc. But repeat breeders is an interesting one, in as much that it's not quite, we can't quite say the percentage calves reared, because we don't know how many cows, for instance, went to the bull. So this information at the moment that's in here just now is just information that's stored on Scott EID on your behalf. So some of the management type stuff is not known. So we've got what we have there is so repeat breeders on the year. Maybe we could tweak the word in there, but essentially that's a number of cows that also calved the previous year. Yeah. Calving spread. Now there's two trains of thought. One, that we could compare the calving spread of the year of interest, so the year that you're in this case we're in 2022, and compare that directly with the other another 2 years, for instance. What we did find was that people were quite quickly wanting to delve into and talk about the whys. Something was lower or not, oh, that's when that's when we didn't put the bull in as quick that year, we're a week late, and etc. And get into the detail. But there's a step that we all need to take before that, and that's just thinking, well, actually, where am I at, and where am I at compared to the trend? Yeah, where's the trend, and all this. So that's what the line is. So there's the previous 3-year average is the dotted line that runs alongside the calving spread. And in this case, this particular farm has a spring and an autumn calving block. Then the next tab down is on cow efficiency. Now, note what we're looking at here is calving interval. Now, that doesn't mean say she's an efficient cow. She might be 365 days calving interval, but she might at the very tail end of your calving period. So it might still be a risk cow, but nonetheless, calving interval is an interesting one. It may provide an indication of fertility. Now, note that within the chart here, they're not equal distributions. So you're talking about anything below 365 days is the first one on the left. Then your 21-day cycle roughly for the next 2, and then you're up to the third cycle 3. Then it's 5 months to over 365 days. Over 365 days, I should say. to the 520-day type window, and then your 6 to 8 months. So what I'm trying to capture there is it just a wide, so spring calving, say, for this time of year? Is it just a long, stretched out spring calving, or are we starting to touch this after kind of a certain period of time? Are we starting to touch into an autumn calving block and stretching into, the cows moving from one block to the other and trying to identify that? So what it's not saying is what you should do about it. It's just highlighting the fact. In this case, they're reasonably tight. There's a few that are slightly over, but I don't know that from what the reason is behind that for this data. All I can do is express the data, and hopefully a way that makes sense for you to then have that kind of conversation, that discussion. Gives you the average and the table below it, the average calving interval, and so the average calving interval for the year, and then the 3-year average as well. Okay, if we move over into the herd efficiency, heifer efficiency tab, what we've got here is the distribution of the age distribution of the heifers coming into the herd. Now, you mentioned earlier that you've got to define what a cow is. So one thing we don't know is if a heifer or a cow farm, if a heifer has had a calf previously, but it was dead before registration, so it was never registered. So that could be a cow, but we don't know that, so she's still seen as a heifer. So a heifer is defined as a female having a calf, a registered calf for the first time. So every now and again, particularly for those that are quite tight with when they calve down heifers, you might see one a wee over to the right hand side, and that may be in that case what that is, but that's a management decision, but it's worth noting. You don't have that level of detail now, and probably the only place that MyHerdStats suggests that there's a good and a bad is there when it talks about percentage calved between 22 and 26 months of age. Now in this case that's 0 because this farm is calving at 3 years old. Now that would suggest that's potentially poor or not good, but I'm not technically saying that. I'm raising the question, I'm raising the flag. And in this farm's case, just because of shed space and etc., there's other reasons behind why they're doing that, and group sizes and such things. But I ask the questions, and very quickly you can see how you can get into really interesting cost-benefit type and practical discussions on what is good and what is bad, and what they should be doing, what the priorities are for the next actions. Moving on to mortalities, what we have here above the line in the top chart is by breed. And what I'm wanting to show here is very quickly, because there's no other place in MyHerdStats where we compare things by compare data by breed. And all I wanted to do here is just flag up or help to flag up if there's a proportional difference between any breeds, or in some cases it'll just be if there's only one breed, one bull for any breed, then it's flagging up a bull issue, I suppose. Because for here we've got, what's that say? That's this particular farm's 98 calves born, but then 5 Charlies died. But there's 43 calves born that were simians, and there's 1 died. But proportionately, there's you want to look at the differences. That's what I'm wanting to flag up in that case. I should have mentioned at the start, when you're going through the tabs, the details button there will give you a wee drop-down explanation of what the chart's trying to explain and some of the restrictions of the data, and what you can do with it. An interpretation of the information you're looking at. Down below provides a summary of the year's data and the total number of deaths of calves born on farm, and then you've got calves born or purchased. The key focus for MyHerdStats is fertility and performance of the breeding herd. So a lot of this data doesn't capture if you buy in a number of cows with calves at foot, for instance. But every now and again, I'll try and capture them, because there comes a point when that you want to know total number of days. So for calves, you want to know the total number as well as what was bred on farm. And if we scroll further down on that same page, you'll get the charts, and there's a profile of the different age groups. So what we can do within the data, you can identify both the age at which the death occurred, but also the time of year. And this is a fairly benign chart, but you can see in there's some particular spikes at the back end, and then a few for young mortalities during the spring block, and I'm guessing then that would be spring block calving issues, and then at the back end, yeah, an outbreak of pneumonia or something, I don't know. But we can see these spikes, and that's the beauty of seeing the data explicitly a bit presented in graphical form. You can start to get a feel for what's actually happening in the herd in retrospect when you're, in the heat of the moment. You don't have time to think about these things, but actually in retrospect, and the cold light of day, when you're looking at management and what was the learnings from the previous year or the last, or during the calving period, then you can start to have a look at these things. Similarly, down below, you can see there's cow deaths, and again, we'll split them up into rough age brackets so we can see if there's anything of meaning in that data. And there's the average line as well, but like so that's 0.3 in April there, but that's what that's saying is because that's the previous 3 years. So that's there's been one death in an April over the last 3 years. So one in 3 is divided by 3 is 0.3. That's the average. So it just gives you a feel if there's any trend in there over and above the in-year's performance. Yep, then they move on to sales, and this is going a bit awry for some reason. And I'll need to get this sorted out, the alignment of the table. But what we have here is all the total sale of young stock and the average over the past 3 years. So again, you're seeing how that compares on the trend, and sales of young stock born on farm. Again, that's split between the two, and then sale of cows. And then the next chart down, this next table down, provides more information on the days to sale. Now, what that doesn't do, that's saying what age they were when you sold them. Now, what we don't know yet is what weight those animals were, what the performance was, and how they fared over the kind of grazing season or in the house. But it's starting to kind of proxy for that. And scrolling further down, still within the sales tab, you've got, again, a graphical kind of presentation of when those sales are occurring and at what age they're occurring, and then you've got the data below that, so you can see what age brackets the young stock were when they were sold. Again, you can see that, compare that with the trend. And similarly, you can do the same for house sales, so you can see that across the year. And just about last but not least, I think a wee bit of background as well. So that's the last of the data. That's the last of the tabs just now, and trying to if you get a feel for the direction of travel, there's quite a number of there's a proud brand image, and we're aiming from greater value from the farm gate, and in data, hopefully actions and then the credibility that those actions provides gives greater confidence in generating more value from to the farm gate, and certainly when you see livestock farms across the globe are looking at this. Certainly there's big moves in Canada, in America, down in Brazil. There's certified net carbon neutral cattle coming out of Brazil. Now, I don't know what sits behind that information, but the point is there's an integrity piece about what we're doing as an industry as well, and this is kind of part of it. If we can both, so we talked about there at the very start about improving business and environmental efficiency, and this is part of it. We can capture and demonstrate the value. It gives credibility to our claims that we're amongst the best in the world, which I think we are. And again, Scotland's got this vision of becoming among the most, the lowest carbon and most efficient food producers in the world, and I think that's something we would all like to get behind. But to do that, we need to have a competitive sector. So we need the right policies in place, but we also need, there's a lot that's in our control as well, where we can support farm performance, farm profitability, as well as which is good for the rural community, but is also good for the environment and potentially biodiversity as well. And again, that comes back to, if we can log that properly and demonstrate that value, then there's brand benefit in that, and hopefully value add. So we can see some of these opportunities, looking at herd efficiency and farm performance, and then we'll talk about this, a proud industry, and actually driving that endeavour forward a bit further, and actually what we're doing here with data is expressing stuff that my grandfather or our forebears would be able to tell us. It's about improving fertility, it's about improving growth rates, it's about reducing the number of unproductive stock that are on the farm, and lowering morbidity and mortalities. So it's trying to achieve these, but we've got much bigger herds now, and we're dealing with a lot, with bigger farm sizes, and there's a lot of other things going on. So actually, data can be used, the power of data, to actually hopefully give confidence in management decisions through better management insight. That's the aim of MyHerdStats. That is me, Hazel. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Robert. That was a good run through. So I think just to add to what Robert said, I think it's a starting point. And I think, Robert, the most important thing to sort of say as well is that this is just the first stage. That's not it, is it? There's going to be a continual development plan to keep, adding to the benefits of MyHerdStats, isn't there?
Yeah. No, that absolutely. We've got a long list of features that we would like to add, and things that we want to tweak even within what we do have, just to try and express information as well as we can, so we get everybody who's wanting to engage with MyHerdStats can get a wee step closer to making an actual management decision. And there's so that's the first thing, was just getting started. Get it out there. It's presentable enough to get it out there, and already folks are we know, we can see the analytics, if you like, of the gross numbers that are engaging with, which is fantastic to see the level of engagement so far. And that's the point here, is just to get that first step, and the next thing is to present it maybe slightly differently, get a bit of feedback, present what we need to do slightly differently, and build on it from there, add features as we can. Yep.
So when you say feedback, that was going to be my next question. So if farmers are looking at the tool and think, oh, it'd be great if it could do this, is this coming? Do they have a little bit of a say in where, what drives the tool forward? Or
Yep, no, definitely. Yep. I'm really keen, because we started off with and still have a pilot group of farmers, and that was fantastic. But you'll get, if we understand what everybody's thinking and what everybody thinks would be valuable, because what we're not trying to do though is there's still software packages out there. So what we're not trying to do is replicate that and do that job. What we're trying to do is just express data in a way that's available to everybody across the industry.
So it might not become a management tool. The intention isn't it's a management tool to add, your weights and weaning weights and things like that on. As you say, it's not there to compete with these packages. It's about expressing the factual data that comes from your statutory movements, basically, or registrations and movements.
Yeah, no, there's an opportunity certainly to add other data sets into it as well, and if there's wee bits of information around about mortalities pre-registration, that's because there's a gap there. We don't know how many went to the how many cows went to the bull.
Yeah.
But equally, we don't know how many died, how many calves died before registration. So there's gaps in there, so we can't help identify that through the charts and the tables, without that information. And it's not to say that everybody puts it in, because it's not statutory, but if folk were starting to put that information in, then it starts to refine the level of understanding that you as farmer will be able to take out of the information.
Yeah. This is it, because I think for me, one of the key things would be to have the capability to add in, either a cow that's calved with a stillborn calf, or, as you say, one that's died before it's tagged, because these potentially are the ones that will flag up on your calving interval report that they're way out, but it's because actually they did calve within a good calving interval the year before. It's just that calf wasn't registered, so it's not known to the system.
Yeah.
And I think that, the good thing is as well, I had to relook on mine as well while you were talking, and I didn't actually realise, I knew there was a drop down list to change the year, but I didn't realise it was back to 2016. So, everybody, when you log on to have a look at it, you've already got 8 years worth of charts there, which is great. We've got a few questions for you, Robert, and they're good ones. So I'll pop some of these to you just now before we move on. So the first one is, obviously at the moment, the last year populated is 2022. So this is obviously somebody that's been on and can see that. When is 2023 available? Do these statistics come up, throughout the year? Could you go on in June and look at your calving interval so far, or, things like that so far, or will it not pre-populate until 2023 is finished and all the data is available?
Yep. Good question. Okay. So at the moment, it's just based on the calendar year. So
okay.
it's a fixed period. So the period is 12 months. The period needs to be 12 months to make sense of the cycle of the data, and just what happens on farm. So we have breeding cycles for a year and stuff. But so it needs to be a 12-month cycle, but it's currently fixed to the calendar year, January to December.
Okay, so it's likely you wouldn't get the 2023 data until next January to go back and review.
Yeah, that's how it would be at the very, very moment. But the next step is to make that more dynamic and flexible, so that you can put down. So let's say your business year end is the 31st of March, or the tax year end. You wanted to do that.
Okay.
Then the drop down box wouldn't just be for 2022, but it would be, you could put it to 2023, but it would be March, and it would go to that point, and then it would just alter. So if it was March 2023, then it would just be the 12 months period from that date. So that's the next. I know. So that's quite a big one to ask of the programming guys.
Yeah, I can imagine they've got a list.
Yeah, but it's a really good one, and probably not probably, it is really quite important to help. There's no point in it just being sitting there static for 12 months.
Yeah, before you can see it.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Another very important question: can these charts be printed off? Can somebody print off a report if they've got a meeting with their vet or such like? Can they print that off and actually provide their vet with a bit of paper?
Yep. So yeah, just print the screen at the moment. The next stage is there's another task there to print as PDF. So you could send it an email. So it could be done electronically. And my preference is also a CSV file, so that you can get the raw data out of the numbers that are presented in MyHerdStats, and that way you can slice and dice it, however you want, to align with your beef group, or for your vet to have a look at it, or however it's needed. I'm kind of conscious that And we really, it's really easy to go, we could do this with the data, we'd slice and dice it in different ways to present it like this and this and this. But actually, need to watch it, because if you don't watch what you're doing, well, actually, is that important? And it kind of maybe is to a few people, but it needs to be to a lot of people, because otherwise you end up with a lot of stuff on there that people go, well, I included, go number blind, and you can go chart blind, and then you can't really see through the trees.
Just with too much, overwhelmed with too much data, almost.
Exactly. Yeah. So nice clean lines, keep it nice and simple. Yeah.
Well, you've almost preempted your next two questions then. So we'll just go with these two and then we'll move on. But one was, is there any ability to compare your own farm stats with national or regional figures?
Right. So the national data stuff comes up reasonably regular, and I like it. It's a goodie. Compared to some, if I've been blunt, compared to some other priorities, I was thinking that's down the list. Now I completely accept I'm hearing it quite a few times, so it should be up the list. My problem is with it, if I was to put in national averages, it's probably not that aspirational for a lot of people. So
you almost need the top 25%, the average.
We need something else to show. And another problem with averages is that it brings everybody back to the middle. And you could have a lowland, because averages, so within that you'll have, and on this call we'll have lowland herds with a completely different cow to somebody who's on some of the Hebrides and away up in grade 5.3 land. And what they're trying to achieve and what they're doing is quite different to the targets that need to be set for a lowland herd. So, but then the averages bring all this stuff, squash it all back together. So you end up with something is that relevant to my farm and my farm type and my system that I'm trying to develop and the genetics that I've got. So you'll
end up with some farmers almost constantly setting themselves up to fail because they're never going to reach that target from their circumstances. And then you'll have other businesses that actually don't have anywhere else to go because they're already probably above that target as well, isn't it? It's the two ends of the scale.
Because I was going back to the bit at the beginning about understanding the relationships between management, environment, and genetics. So environment being just the farm and where you are and the land type and all that stuff. Probably on the north side of the hill, the south side of the hill. What we're working with here, compared to the management of the herd. And then the genetics that we are putting into that system. So how do we get all those things to dovetail to? So what's right for one is not going to be right necessarily for the others. That's why I've got a hesitancy against showing national data. Now, everything's possible. Some of it takes more computing power than others, but everything's possible. But it is one. But that's the reason why we've held back. Now, one thing that we did look at was putting in typical targets, so nationally accepted, like for fertility, and so there's a few targets. There's a few things that we could put targets with, but a lot of it's not. It doesn't align with the national targets because like some bulls, a number of cows that go to the bull and such.
Last question, and then we'll move on and come back to. This is it. If anybody's got any more questions, please put them in the chat or the Q&A and we can pick them up at the end. But in the future, is there an opportunity that the tool could develop to include feedback from abattoirs so that businesses that aren't finishing their own cattle, can get that important feedback on the performance, grades, weights, etc.? Is that a possibility?
Yes.
Short and sweet.
yeah, 100%. It takes a little bit of discussion because that's within that data set sits within lots of different companies. But once you get over that hurdle, absolutely.
Okay, thanks, Robert. So, yep, just quickly, some of you may have been on the webinar that we held back in November on the Preparing for Sustainable Farming initiative, in which my colleague Tiffany covered the funding available for the soil sampling and the carbon audits. So just in case you weren't aware of this, there was a webinar providing all information on the funding that's already there, because through that Tiffany did mention that the animal health and welfare interventions would follow in the new year, which they now have. So if you are interested in going back and watching this webinar, it's available on the FAS website and on the Farm Advisory Service YouTube channel. So just to go back and set the scene, so the National Test Programme was launched in the spring last year, so 2022, and it was designed to inject £51 million into the industry over the next 3 years, and the vision with that being it's a two-track approach. So track one will focus on efficiency with support targeted as incentivising. Now that's the key word here with the National Test Programme. It's incentivising farmers to take a closer look at their businesses and start looking at establishing baselines. That's what Robert's sort of talking about there. What the data that's on MyHerdStats at the moment is your baseline, and it's looking at that baseline to see where improvements can be made. So in the guidance, the wording is that it's designed to help farmers meet the conditions of future agricultural policy and support. So this is where we are now, gives a little hint of where things are going in the future. And then track two will include the design and testing of tools that are going to reward businesses on the efficiency and environmental improvements that they deliver on farm level. It's not industry level, it's on farm level. So this is why we're encouraging people just to have a look at their businesses at the moment and see where they're at and see where we could make improvements. And this is where MyHerdStats, comes into place. And there's other tools as well that will come to light as we move through the next couple of years. It could also, thinking forward, when we talk about conditionality, increasing conditionality of future schemes, this is where, businesses could be rewarded, with better performance, such as reducing calving intervals, reducing days to slaughter, for example. So that's where the information that's on MyHerdStats, could be really key in the future. So it's important that we just keep our eye on the ball with things like that. So just to move on, so the animal health and welfare interventions were just announced last month, and they sit under the track one of the Preparing for Sustainable Farming scheme. So this is, as I said, a starter package, and it's to prompt a review of herd and flock performance. So there's a menu of 7 options that are available to all businesses. And obviously, we talk about efficiency a lot, but improving efficiency reduces our costs, which then has a knock-on effect of higher profit margins, and it's also contributing to a reduced carbon footprint. So the Preparing for Sustainable Farming initiative the animal health and welfare interventions started in January 2023. So although we've already had the carbon audit funding and the soil sampling in 2022, the animal health and welfare just opened on the 1st of January there. The claim portal isn't yet available, and it'll be later in the year. So we're not sure when later actually is, but it will be available at some point. The investigations and actions from the menu of options must be completed by the 31st of December 2023, and then there'll be a claim deadline for these interventions of the 28th of February. Sorry, I've got 2023 in my presentation, apologies, that's a mistake, it's 2024. And as with the carbon audits and the soil sampling, there's only one claim allowed per year. It is recommended that you have a carbon audit to sit along with this option, but it's not a requirement, it's just a recommendation. So these are the options that are available. So it's a standard £250 per option. So regardless which option you choose off this list, you will receive £250. So that's basically £500 for your 2 menu options if you choose to claim the 2. And then in year 1, when you make your first claim, you'll also be awarded a £250 development fee. So basically over the 2 years, there'll be £1,250 available to each business. So I'm not going to go through them all in detail. We'll just sort of fly past them. So for cattle, there's your pre-breeding bull examination. There's calf respiratory investigation and virus screening. There is sheep scab screening, iceberg disease screening for sheep. So that's your MV, Johne's, border disease, etc., OPA. There's a flock lameness assessment by your vet, again, with an action plan. And then both for cattle and sheep, they deliver fluke and worm facial egg count testing. So those are the options that are available at the moment. Now, to claim any of these options, so remember it's one claim, so you would need to complete one of these expert advisor forms for each of the options that you choose, but as I say, only with one claim per year. So this expert advisor form is to be submitted, and unlike the soil and carbon audits, you don't require to have an invoice or proof of payment. But if you are selected for an inspection, and they might ask for more information, but with these claims, it is just going to be this expert advisor form. So these must be completed by your vet or a consultant, depending on what option it is. And it must be evidence of the investigation and the advised action provided on this document. So farmers cannot fill them in yourselves. It's got to be a vet, and you'll see down in this bottom right-hand corner, there must be a signature and the practice stamp, just for that extra check. So you can actually go to the Rural Payments website, just for that menu of options. There's a little bit more information on what's required, because do check that sometimes with some of the options there's a limit, sorry, not a limit, a starting level with how many animals you must do. So for example, the sheep scab, it must be 12 animals per management group that you scan. So just check the menu for the requirements just before you go out and do anything. All the veterinary practices have had an email from the Scottish Government about this scheme. And I know in our area, myself and one of my colleagues, we've actually spoken to the vet practices just to make sure they're aware of it and what's required from them. But your vet should already be aware of the scheme. The £250 development fee as well that you receive is actually an opportunity for you to get the vet out on farm. If you've got a problem with pneumonia, for example, it's an opportunity to get either a consultant or your vet out to have a look. Is the ventilation right? Are there any amendments you could make to your sheds to try and reduce this instead of just turning to the vaccines in every case? So that £250 development fee, it is there to be used for good use to see how you could make improvements on your farm. So just before we move on to the questions, that's all I've got to say on the funding. But if you do have any queries, then you can always contact the FAS helpline. So the phone number, the email address and the website is all up there on the screen. If you think of any burning questions tomorrow or next week, please don't hesitate to pick up the phone and find out your answer. And on the FAS website as well, there's a range of sort of useful resources on the website there too. And everybody that has joined tonight, the usual end of webinar sort of plug, you will be sent round a feedback form. And I'd be very, very grateful if you could complete this for us. It does help us improve what we do, identify the opportunities, and obviously feedback to Scottish Government, as that's the most important thing to what farmers are looking for and what they require for your business. So please do fill out the feedback form. So on that note, I will just stop sharing. And if Robert's still here, we'll go back to the questions. So say, please, if you've any questions, if you put them in the chat or the Q&A. So here's one for me. So is it one carbon audit claim and one health claim? Sorry, yep, no. So yep, so per year, you're obviously allowed your one carbon audit claim, your one soil sample claim, and your one animal health and intervention claim. So yes, it's one per scheme. So you're only allowed to claim for each option once in the year, but you can have claims over all the different opportunities. And you still get your one-off development fee, whether it be for the soil sampling or for the animal health and welfare interventions. Any more questions? I think we're getting away quite lightly tonight, Robert. So we'll just give it a few minutes to see if MD thinks of anything else. One of the things I guess I would like to ask you, Robert, is, so for businesses that want to start having a look at MyHerdStats and see where they could potentially improve, what would be your sort of top tip? What area would you recommend people have a look at first? I know that will vary greatly across different businesses and their systems, but what would be your key recommendation to farmers watching tonight? What should they go and do now when they log on to MyHerdStats?
Yeah, okay.
Catch you totally off guard.
No, it's a good question, and that's the difficulty with data when there's potentially so many questions to be asked of it, and understanding what the priorities are within your own business. So it can be quite a lot, and if you try and tackle too many, or you think there's, and you list too many, then you risk not doing any, because it just becomes a bit overwhelming, frankly, to be honest. My key ones, as far as so business efficiency, I suppose, and as well as kind of environmental efficiency, and how would be to look at the fertility in the herd, both in terms of, well, there's a carbon interval one for a start potentially. Now, it'd be interesting to know what it doesn't tell you. It might tell you, so I didn't touch on it, there's a statistic there that shows you the number of cows that are over 400 days calved, for instance. So there's still a little bit of work. What when they do next is be able to hover over that, and you can actually identify the cows. So it takes us a little bit closer to understanding whether that cow is genuinely running for the year, or whether she was had a calved twin on it. But it's a good starting point, just to see what the fertility is like in the herd, and then of course the calving profile is simple as that is. It's a really interesting place to start. Well, does that match in with my grass growth? You see, if you're spring calving, for instance, does that match in with when my grass is starting, and my making the most then out of grass? And then the shed space, or the spikes, if there's spikes and mortalities, is actually, well, what else can I do to tweak these things, so that I can reduce the housing pressure, for instance. The other one, I suppose, is a bit of a contentious one. It's always a good one to throw in there, about the age at first calving. Again, there's plenty of reasons why folks don't do that, but if we can manage those heifers separately after calving, and look after them well in a separate management group, and it doesn't cause chaos with selecting the right bulls and all the rest of it that go along with all of that, actually, well, we can save a year, and that means she's productive more quickly. And I've not seen any evidence to say that means that she's going to last less time at the other end, which is also something that's sometimes mentioned, and maybe true for some. But that's another one. The ones that were there are, the mortalities. We're talking about mortalities, fertility, and growth rate, and unproductive animals. So those four things, just what our forefathers would talk about, but we're just doing it in data terms. We're just trying to show it in data terms to make it a bit easier to try and prioritize.
Yeah. Great, thanks, Robert. There's a couple coming in for me, and it's probably because I've not been clear enough. So, okay, so it's a question for me on carbon audit. So somebody's made a claim for a soil sample that has a valid previous carbon audit. Would that be valid? So yeah, your carbon audits are valid for 3 years, basically, for the scheme. So at the point when you're making your claim for a soil sample, if you have a carbon audit that's been dated within the previous 3 years, then that's okay. If your carbon audit, if you go to make your claim and your carbon audit is past the 3-year date, then you would need to update it to claim that soil sample. But again, you would get the 500. At this point, you would get the £500 funding for that carbon audit, because it's not been previously funded through PSF. So I hope that clears that up. Another one for me, is there a minimum herd total for claiming the Animal Health and Welfare Interventions Grant? No, there isn't. As I say, for a couple of the options, there's a minimum that you need to do, you know, for the, like I said, for the sheep, you know, it's 12 sheep that you need to scan out each management group. But no, for them, just as I say, check before you proceed with them that, you know, the guidance is there with the requirements. But no, there isn't. The point of it is it's open to everybody. It's open to crofters and farmers. So basically any business that's got a BRN, a business reference number, is eligible to claim this. So no, it's open to everybody. There's no minimum herd sizes. There's a few more coming in. So we've got one here back for you, Robert, on MyHerdStats. So somebody's saying that AI will affect some of the statistics. Is there any way to capture the impact? So I'm not entirely sure. So AI, and whilst, you know, I suppose it depends. Is it a system where you're doing 2 rounds of AI and then maybe putting a bull out? Is it 1 AI and a bull out, or is it just a system where it's AI and then nothing? So I suppose it's a bit of a tricky one without knowing the full background. If you want to pop some more information in that would be great. Because it's just really going to go on, you know, the calving interval, Robert, isn't it? That's purely it. So if something's been AI'd a couple of times and not held, and maybe settles to the bull in the 3rd cycle, you know, I don't think there's any way to capture whether it's a natural service or an AI, is there?
No. What some people, I don't know what the stat is of how many people are registering the sire, but it ain't many. But it's amazing how much more you can do with the data by not just splitting. We talked about, you know, we presented it by breeds when we're looking at the calves, but you can also then do it by bull. Then, you know, okay, it's quite difficult sometimes to identify what the bull is, particularly if you're rotating bulls and things. So it's not quite answering this question, but it does remind me one about sires. And again, we're talking about, you know, that next again layer. What's the next layer to making it more granular, to get more information out of the information that's already there, and with the data that's already there. And that's, so we've done the work on a sire tab. It's not in there yet. There's not maybe enough people that are recording the sire to get the best benefit out of there, but maybe we should just get it coded in to the and have a tab there to show what you can do with the data once you know what the bull is, or have a good idea of what the bull is, because then you can look at, well, how many calves is that bull sired? When did it happen? You know, was it happen quickly, or was it, you know, throughout the season? Because if it's amazing when we did this with the great work with pilot group of farmers, you know, and you could identify the bull into the field, and you guys on the call will identify with this. You'll have a bull that will just go in and he's off, you know, and you can see that in how he settles the cows, because you can work it out from the calving interval. You don't actually know, you know, okay, give or take gestation, which may be plus or minus, whatever. But broadly speaking, you've got a good idea when that is happening, and you'll have other bulls that just, you know, and it settles cows right through to the end of the bulling season, whenever that may be. And that's actually quite useful to know that in its own self, you know. So yeah. And then you can splice the performance of the calves by genetics of the bull that you brought in. So then you can start to ask, well, actually, am I buying in the right bulls? Or more to the point, is the bull genetics that I think I'm buying in, am I able to realize those genetics through the management that I'm putting in place, or the environment that I have, the farm that I have?
Yeah.
So you can ask some really, really good questions really quickly.
Yep, no, they brought back, yeah, 1 round of AI and then out to the bull. Because obviously there'll be a lot of different systems in there. We were doing some filming for another FAS project at our SRUC farm yesterday, Easter Howgate. So they used to operate a 3 AI program, and then it was, if you've not settled to the AI, you're out. And they've reduced that down to 2 now. So this is it. There'll be lots of different systems out there. And somebody else has added that a sire tab would be really handy. So there's one for your list, Robert. Okay, I think we've got everything answered just now, Robert. So I think on that note, as I say, if there's any more questions, please don't hesitate to to contact us. And also there's, you know, for anybody that's looking for more information, as I say, on the MyHerdStats, if you go to Scotty ID on the homepage, there is as well a user guide, a PDF user guide to MyHerdStats, which will obviously be developed as the system is. So it'll be good to see where that system goes in the next few years. And then for the animal health and welfare interventions, as I say, you can visit the Rural Payments website and then all schemes and click on to preparing for sustainable farming, and all the guidance is available there as well. So really all that's left for me to say is, Robert, thank you for joining us tonight and walking us through MyHerdStats.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you all for joining. And as I say, the recording of this webinar, if anybody wants to watch it back or pass it on to anybody, will be available on the FAS website in the coming days.